So earlier today, I just played a bullet game at 100% accuracy with an opening win in the Alabin Sicilian, which finished with an ultra-delayed bomb cloud for the checkmate, and I just had to show it to you guys. The really cool thing about this opening as well is that Black plays pretty much all of the natural moves which seem incredibly logical but actually just lose the game on the spot, so it's fairly likely that you could get this opening in your own games. I started with pawn e4, they went for c5 the Sicilian, I went for d4 which is a Smith more a Gambit. I called this the Alpine Sicilian because we end up transposing into the Alpine, and I'll show you how you can reach the position that we got in the game via the mainline Alpine. So they captured on d4, I played c3, and they played d5. This is where the transposition occurs. I capture on d5 takes and take on d4. Now, the way you reach this position by a regular Alpin, let me just go back, is if you play c3, they play d5, which I think is almost the most common move nowadays, next to knight f6. You capture here, they take with the queen, you play d4, taking space in the center, and after the takes, you can see that this is the exact position that was reached by this move order where we tried to sacrifice a pawn. So black continues with knight c6, which is the most natural move and the most common move, putting pressure on our d4 pawn. I play knight f3, defending the d4 pawn, and they played bishop g4, pinning my knight and adding more pressure to the d4 pawn. Now, if you don't know this opening well, it looks like white is actually in trouble here and black is doing quite well, as black is threatening to capture the knight like this, damage our pawn structure even, and then win a pawn in the center. So it doesn't look particularly impressive unless you know the move knight c3 here with white. And now white is actually doing very well. You have to capture on f3 now with black, as if you move away, then you get in big trouble with pawn d5, the knight gets kicked out, and you open up all kinds of attacks on the light squares to the king. So black has to capture the knight on f3 like this, and we take back with the pawn, which looks like a very, very ugly move, looks like a very strange move, especially considering now we've lost the defender of the d4 pawn, so black can just capture it. So what is white doing here? Well, white actually has a very dangerous idea, which is that their bishop pair has an extremely open board to operate on, and white is going to get a huge development initiative for their pawn sacrifice. So the idea here actually starts with queen trade, which is very counterintuitive, but it does make a lot of sense if you get to the root of the position, because with the white, you're eliminating the most active black piece, which is their queen, and that queen has already moved once and twice, whereas our queen has only moved once to capture it. And now after their knight is going to move a second time, we offer to exchange the other knight with our knight as well that's moved twice. So we've now eliminated not one, but two active pieces from the board if they're to capture our knight like that, which would simultaneously develop our bishop into the game. So if black captures the knight, then white is completely winning here after the bishop takes it, the king goes here, and a nice king e2, you'll see this is where I got the idea from later, where the rook is coming in, the bishop is coming in, and the black king is simply without any defense whatsoever, as the entire party has not developed. But you might be going back to that original position and thinking, well, what are you doing? You've just blundered knight c2 check. Surely that's a fork on the king and the rook, and you'd be correct. However, we are also threatening a fork on the king and the rook. And what you'll notice about the position is that after they give a check, and we move the king over, they've now deactivated their only active piece, which was the knight standing nicely here. And after we give them this check, and the king moves to the side and we move to capture the rook, then white is actually doing quite well, because this knight is stuck in the corner, and we're ready to get the bishops out very, very quickly, like here and here, for example, move the king up, and then collect the knight. There's even some nice lines here where if black gets greedy and tries to capture our knight, then we can play bishop to f4, stopping them from making progress towards the knight, and after they try to develop, we can play bishop to d3, king to e2, and we will win the knight in the corner and be able to rescue our knight via c7. So these are some of the fundamental ideas of this opening. It's not all just traps, and it's in fact very sound, but in the game, our opponent actually decided to play long castles, which is given best move by the computer, but leads to a very, very shaky and very dangerous position after we eliminate their only active piece in the center of the board with knight takes on d4. This lures the rook out into the center, where we can then follow up with bishop to e3. And you'll notice now, our bishop pair is fully operational, as Agameta would like to say, and we're developing with tempo on the rook, which is once again black's only active piece. Now, the only move where black does not lose on the spot is rook d6, which is quite a hard move to find because you're just dropping the a7 pawn and it looks like a big attack is still coming your way with all these bishop checks, this rook checks, and now the king won't even have access to the b8 square. So this is quite an unintuitive move, and instead my opponent played a blunder here, rook to a4, which loses the game on the spot even though it's the most natural move in the position, defending the a7 pawn. And the reason is because black has put their only active piece from the center onto the side of the board and has no development over here. They're not even close to getting the bishop out or the rook out, and the king is left stranded in the center of the board. Even though the queens have been traded, we have more than enough material with 2 bishops and 2 rooks on an open board to come and checkmate the black king. And seeing the rook's awkward place on the side of the board, I follow up with another bishop development here, bishop to b5, targeting the rook on the side and continuing to slice away squares from the black king. As you can see, it's actually getting pretty hairy, seeing as my 2 rooks are about to come in, and as you can see with the delayed pawn cloud, the other rook might be about to enter the game as well. So opponent plays rook a5, they have to save their rook if they don't want to lose catastrophic material and lose the game, and now comes rook c1. The first of the 2 rooks has joined the action. As you can see, the opponent still has literally 0 development, which is not very good for them. The rook is on the side of the board, and the king only has 1 legal move with king to d8. Now is where we play the brilliant pawn cloud, king e2, which allows the other rook to come into the game, and this is a checkmate threat. Because if you capture the bishop, this is why it's a brilliancy, it's a bishop sacrifice, we have rook check, there is no piece that can block the king here. The king would have to go all the way back to its home square after it's done its little jig across the board, and we would deliver a rook c8 checkmate, which is very, very nice. That, however, is not how the game ended. In the game, my opponent played pawn f6, which allows rook to d1, rook hd1 with a checkmate in 1, assisted by the bishop and the other rook, controlling all of the squares, and I just think that this is an absolutely hilarious move to end the position on, with f6 fully sealing in the black knight, which was black's only real hope at trying to catch up on development. So I think this game highlights a really important concept that I want to get across to you, which is that trading your opponent's active developed pieces for your pieces which have not yet developed into the game is a very beneficial way to try and further increase your development lead. You can think of it in terms of simple maths, right? If your opponent has a piece that's moved 3 times, that means they've invested a lot in that piece. Whereas if you have a piece that's moved 0 times, then exchanging that piece after just one move is going to increase your development lead by 2 points. And the more your development lead increases, the more likely it is you're going to have a devastating checkmate attack on your opponent's king, even if queens come off the board. That concept, combined with an open position which allows your pieces to thrive, is what will win you these beautiful games. So I hope you guys enjoyed this nice win, not only giving you a little tricky trap to use, but also getting across a really important concept about initiative and trading off your opponent's more developed pieces for your less developed pieces. If you did like my style of teaching and would be interested in some one-to-one coaching, I've got a few spaces left, so check the description, send me an email if you're interested. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!